Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. We're going to talk a little bit about how to win in the current housing market, and I'll share some tips to succeed in a current competitive housing market. These Lunch and Learns are always relatively intimate, which is great because it allows you to actually ask any questions that you have. Please pop the questions in the Q&A section so I can answer them at the end of the presentation. Any question, please feel free just pop them in the Q&A and I'll answer them at the end. My name is Kim Paula. I am the founder of Expat Housing Network, and I am half Dutch, half Caribbean, and a proud father of a daughter of 4 who actually thinks she's 16. I bought my own home about 5 years ago, and honestly, back then it was a competitive market as well. I had no idea what I was doing, so it took me about 7 offers before I got the actual offer accepted. It wasn't the reason why I got into the business. No, we were helping people finding a home to rent back then. But at some point, a lot of people asked us, okay, hey, can you support us with buying a home as well? And we decided to actually pursue that and get more information out of it. And over the years, we've built up a lot of experience. We've helped a lot of people buy a home. And honestly, if I would have known then what I know now, things would have looked probably a little bit different back then. Why is that important? Because it means that I will actually want to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that I made when I started. Today's goal is to add value to you. What does that mean? I'm going to share a lot of information. I'll try to, because I know we've booked in about 30 minutes for this session. I'll try to concentrate and go through everything relatively quickly. Please note this session is also recorded. It will be shared with you, so you don't have to take a lot of notes. We'll decipher a few things, and then hopefully we'll share some insights. Um, but before we do, I'd love to get to know you guys a little bit better. I created a little poll, a few questions, 3 questions. Please feel free to answer them. You don't, it's not mandatory, but this will actually help me understand where you guys are coming from and what the demographics are a little bit, so I can actually manage and tailor make this session a little bit more to your liking. I'm seeing a few answers come in already. Hope everyone is seeing the poll. Perfect. Grab a sip. I'll wait 10 more seconds. Cool. Okay, thanks. So the majority of you actually found us either via Facebook or newsletter. Age group 26 to 45. That's great. And what does your household look like? A few singles and one couple is here. And what made you decide to buy? The rents are too high. The majority of you, I would like to settle, which is a great compliment for the Netherlands. So we're happy to have you. And I would like to build up equity, which of course is a result of buying a home. Perfect. Thanks a lot for sharing the information. And let's move on. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the EHN, of course. We'd love to introduce ourselves. We're going to talk about the mind state of getting to know the housing market and what's a reference. We're going to talk about 5 tips how to succeed in the current market. But let's start because I believe that greatness is achieved in the agency of others. And by others, I mean the buying team from Expat Housing Network. So either of these great girls and guys who you'll meet actually during the process, depending a little bit on where you're looking to buy. So we help support throughout the west of the Netherlands. So that's Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, but also the south, Eindhoven, and so on. So if you're looking to buy in any of these areas, then we're happy to support. Don't forget Utrecht, Hilversum, anything in between. And we're actually branching out to Maastricht as per next month. So please hit us up if you're interested in using our service in any of these areas. But who are we? So EHN, we're not typical real estate agents. So none of us have a background in real estate. We all have a background in either liberal arts, psychology, or social related stuff. And why is that important? Because I believe that the biggest aspect of this service that we offer is making sure that your expectations are managed and understanding what it is that you're looking for. Of course, knowledge and expertise is one thing, but that can be built up with experience. And everyone within the company and in the team has a lot of experience. They've been helping people out for years now, so we know what we're talking about. The other thing is that we're not traditional because we only support internationals, and we only support with buying. We also support with renting. That's not very relevant for now, but we only support with, or you guys, with buying a home. Why is that important? Because when you compare an agent who has a, well, no, let's not compare, but let's just have a look at an agent that has a client that wants to sell his house and a client that wants to buy a house. Currently, it's a seller's market, so it's much more tempting for the agent to actually go towards the selling client, right, and spend the majority of his time there. So you'll not be a main priority. With us, you'll be the main priority. And we have gotten so much experience with actually buying homes that our processes are very aligned, very efficient, and that we've built up networks and we have a system in place that will help us actually secure the deal for you. We charge a fixed fee. We don't believe in commission. We don't believe in very strange incentives. Why would you actually pay more if you're already paying more for your property? That's very odd. So we say, okay, hey, looking at the value of our service plus the amount of time that we spend on it and so on, this is what we charge. We'll get to the actual amounts later. And we know what it's like to settle in a new country. So everyone that you just saw on that list is from another country. We have a few Dutchies in house, but the majority have actually lived abroad or have moved from abroad to the Netherlands. So we know what it's like to set up and find a new home. Our service offerings, so we offer two different packages. One is a smart package. It's kind of like the unaccompanied version. We do everything for you. We do the intakes, we do the property review, the market value review, we do the offer submission, legal document review, third-party bookings, and we transfer, do the support, offer support with transfer. We charge €2,000 for this, well, 1999. And that's including everything. So there's no hidden fees, no hidden costs. This is what you'll pay. The complete service is where we actually hold your hands. We'll actually schedule the viewings. We'll actually attend the viewings. We'll attend the notary. We'll attend the technical inspector and so on. This is more for the people who are looking for an extra set of eyes or accompanied support. So this is where we do charge a little bit more. Time is money. I don't really like that sentence, but in this case, it is true, especially in the current competitive market. You can take one or two or three offers before your offer gets accepted. And then we do viewings with you. So it takes a little bit more time. But this is what we charge. Again, no hidden fees, no hidden taxes, no hidden service costs or anything like that. Okay, so what is our added value? When you work with the HN, then the selling agents will take you more seriously compared to when you work with either somebody else or if you submit the offer yourself. We can sometimes book viewings when it's no longer possible. And of course, we support with the legal documents. We help define the market value, which I'll talk a little bit more about a little bit later because it's super, super important. And we'll, of course, also inform you about rules and regulations. And the last things, we make sure you don't make the same mistakes that we made. 99% of our clients finally buy with our assistance, and the majority of them actually buy a property that's either equal to the market value or below the market value. So that's a good sign. Enough about us. Let's get out of the way and let's now focus on, okay, hey, before you actually get into this market, the proper mindset is important. What does that have to do with anything? Why? Well, the important thing is that if you understand the market a little bit, you know what you're getting yourself into. You also know what you can expect to some extent. And currently, what we're seeing is that the market is going up. Ever since the global financial crisis, there was a short dip around 2013. But since then, the market has gone up, 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 up. And now it's very easy to think that we're at the top, we're at the peak, it's not going to go up anymore. Well, I actually thought the same thing 5 years ago. And it's very difficult to predict that. But there's a few elements that can help you predict what will happen in the near or the foreseeable future. One is fiscal benefits. And whenever, well, maybe you've read about it in the news or maybe you've talked about it with other people, but a lot of the arguments about how the housing market is going so crazy is because they say it's a lack of supply and demand, or it's a lack of supply and there's a lot of demand. Of course, that has to do something with the prices, but if we look at the 1970s, there was a higher shortage on properties, but prices didn't increase as much as they did now. Why? Because there was much more government regulations. And this is where the fiscal benefits come into play. The governments are very, very forthcoming towards homeowners and future homeowners. So what did they do? They have the tax exemption. So one of the things that you'll be able to benefit if you're below 35 is from the transfer tax exemption. So you don't pay transfer tax anymore. The second thing is interest rebate. What is that? That is actually you're able to deduct the interest on your mortgage off your taxable income at the end of the year. So you actually get 30 to 40% of that back. There's also no capital gain. So when you buy a property, you sell it again, you've made a profit. You can put that property right back into a new property. So what we see is that a lot of the money is going into the buying market because it's much more interested as well to buy a property versus renting a property. Why? Because the interest rates are low and the rents are quite high. So those things are very, very important when it comes to defining why the market is the way it is right now. Lack of supply, of course, also plays into it a little bit, but not as much as these government regulations or lack of regulations or incentives for homeowners. And of course, the interest rates. We're seeing the interest rates go up a little bit now, but still they're in a very, very historical low. So compared to where they were 10 years ago when they were around 5%, they're now at 1.6, 1.7, depending, of course, on which mortgage provider you go with. So money is cheap, and that's what we're seeing in the actual housing market. Do I expect anything to happen in the foreseeable future? No, I expect that it will continue to go up. When there will be a correction, because there will be a correction at some point, is very difficult to say. How big that correction is going to be is also very difficult to say because we have a relatively stable housing market compared to the global financial crisis. We had properties that were bought with mortgages that were 105, 106, 110% over the actual value. That is no longer the case. Now you can only borrow 100% of the market value. So you have to put in some of your own cash to actually pay for a lot of the bridge fees. Back then, that wasn't the case. And people suddenly had two big loans for what they could actually pay back if they were forced to sell property. So that is not the case now. So we're not going to see like a big steep decrease. Of course, I am not a financial expert or an econometrist, but I foresee that the market is relatively stable. It is still going up, but if there's a correction, you'll see maybe a small correction and before it goes up again. And by the way, I've never heard anyone say, "Oh, I wish I wouldn't have bought 10 years ago." So I think the same thing is very relevant today. Then we've talked a little bit about the mind state. Now talk a little bit about the reference. So a lot of people say, okay, hey, if my mortgage amount, my monthly mortgage amount is lower than my rental price, then I'm well off. I don't think you should be looking at like that because technically what you should be looking at the rental price is higher than the mortgage amount minus the principal because the principal is what you'll actually earn every month, right? That's what you'll put into the property. You get that back once you sell the property again, if of course you sell it for the same price. So technically what you're currently doing is you're comparing a rental price, which money down the drain, to a full mortgage amount, which is not exactly true because it's not all money down the drain. So what should be looking at is what are you spending on rent and what is technically the interest that you pay on a mortgage and what's the principal. So let me give you an example. So we have the rental price here of 1,400 euros, and then we have a mortgage where interest and principal are kind of like equal. So 700 euros interest, 700 euros principal. The total mortgage that you'll pay is actually 1,400 euros, but you'll be saving 700 bucks on a monthly basis, right? So does that mean that your cap should be 1,400 when you actually go for a mortgage? Not necessarily, because if we look at the second option, the same rental price, but your mortgage interest is a little bit higher and your mortgage principal is also a little bit higher because your general mortgage is higher, then you'll spend a little bit more on a monthly basis for your mortgage, but you're still saving about 500 bucks compared to what you would be doing when you were renting. So this is what we always ask people, okay, have a look at it like this and not just compare your mortgage amount versus the rental amount directly, right? Because it allows you to borrow a little bit more and to get a little bit more out of it while still having an advantage towards renting. Okay, so now you have the mind state ready. You have a little bit of a reference. Then we'll go over the tips to actually succeed. Preparation in this case is half the work, right? So those who actually do the calculations, do the work up front, have most likely better scores and better chance of succeeding than those who do not. Okay, and it starts with actually nailing your finances. By the way, for anyone that joined new, pop in any questions that you have in a Q&A. I'll try and answer them at the end of this presentation. I'll first go over everything that we have scheduled for you guys, and I'll answer any of the questions that are in the Q&A. Okay, cool. So nailing your finances, that's the first bit, right? The most important thing is understanding what it is that you can spend on a monthly basis. How much do you want to spend on a monthly basis? And what I would advise you is talk to a mortgage broker. Why is that important? Because the mortgage broker will be able to tell you what the interest rates will be, what the monthly installment will be that you'll have to pay for a mortgage, but also what the other criteria are. For example, if you want to pay off your mortgage faster, it's very important that you understand if there's any penalties involved there. But also, what are the other criteria, conditions? Do you need insurance, stuff like that? So have a chat with a specialist. You can also have a chat with your bank. In this case, it's due diligence. So make sure you do it properly. And in the end, you have to feel comfortable with the party you're going with. So maybe it is a bank, maybe it's a mortgage broker. I always kind of like compared it to as a bank, as an old-fashioned retail shop. Well, you go in there and they have the clothes or the shoes, or name it, that are for sale there. They'll try to sell you those products. They'll not try to guide you towards another shop where they have better products. The mortgage broker is, however, has access to a great number of mortgage providers, and therefore a great number of mortgage products. So what they'll be more of like your personal shopper or your personal stylist, right? They'll actually tell you, I don't care where you buy, as long as you're happy, you know what you're buying, and it suits you. So that's how we compare. They are a little bit more expensive, but please know it's tax deductible what you'll pay for the mortgage broker. But the mortgage broker will help you with finding out what the max is that you can borrow, that you want to borrow. They can also pre-confirm the mortgage. And this is super important because down the line, you'll submit an offer. And if you can make it clear that you're almost guaranteed going to get a mortgage, then most likely the seller will pick you over somebody that doesn't. If you feel uncomfortable with submitting an offer without a mortgage clause, then some mortgage providers or mortgage brokers can actually get the mortgage approved within the cool off period. That is the time you have after signing the purchase contract to kind of like back out of a deal without giving any reason. If they manage to get it secured within that time, then you're in the safe. If they don't, then you can always pull out if you want to. So this is why I would actually advise you to talk to a mortgage advisor. And of course, they'll give you the best rates and conditions to a mortgage. So, also know what you have to spend on purchase fees. So, take into account that you'll spend 3 to 5% on purchase fees, and this is based off the purchase price. So, have a look at that because making sure that you understand your finances is key to starting this process. If you don't, and if you look at properties that are more expensive than you can afford, or they're much closer to your mortgage cap, then you'll not set yourself up for success. Okay, and the last thing is that you can actually start saving some money because it's a relatively competitive market at the moment, and a lot of people are asking or offering over the market value, and that means they'll have to pay it with their own cash. So make sure you save some money towards the purchase fees, but also make sure you have some money if you really like a property that you can actually put it up towards the purchase. Okay. Fundamentals is the second thing. The majority of almost all of the properties come on Funda. There's a few that don't. Those are the most expensive properties that sellers don't really like to have out in the open. So we're talking about 1.5 to 2 million plus properties. But the rest will all show on Funda. A lot of the times we hear, okay, as an agent, don't you get properties shared with you beforehand? Every now and then we do that, but they all end up on Funda. I'm going to share with you some fundamentals. The first one, and this is a fun of you, is that you can actually save. And by the way, maybe some of you already know this, right? I've tried to make this presentation a little bit generic as well, because it depends a little bit on where you are in the process. Some of you might have gone through all of this already. Some of you maybe are near the offer stage, but I want to make sure that I can add value to anyone or to everyone. So if there's any specific things, pop them in the Q&A. But when it comes to Funda, these are fundamental or important things to remember and to know. First of all, you can set up a reminder. So every time a property comes on the market that matches your criteria, it sends you an email. Very, very important because you can act swiftly on that, especially during evenings and when it's busy or when you're working. So have a reminder sent to you. The second thing is that you can actually filter by date whenever you look at it, because newer properties will most likely be more available. And it's very easy to look for a property and forget that it's been on the market for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. Most likely, it's very difficult to get a viewing in by then. Availability is kind of like an open door, but please do select it because there's plenty of properties that they'll still show that are under offer or they're actually sold, and it's not always super clear whether it's sold or under offer. So make sure that you check the availability mark. Then, if you actually go into a property, here is where you can actually see the status. If it says new, it's been on for the last 24 hours. If it says under offer, somebody submitted an offer that's been accepted. If it says sold, then you can't buy it, of course, anymore. The second thing about this thing is that, of course, you have to look at the asking price. It's very important. But the most important thing is this part, especially now. Properties move very, very quickly. So getting a viewing in is already a challenge for some. What you can do is whenever a property services, do the direct booking because it actually puts you in the system of the realtor. Once you're in the system, most likely they'll reach out to you. Depends a little bit on how fast you were. You actually be able to get a viewing. Of course, if you can't get a viewing, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Then One thing that's good to know is whenever you look for a property and you know what your mortgage cap is, start looking for properties between 15 to 20% below your mortgage or your budget gap. Why? Because sometimes agents put up for a lot below the actual market value and people are still overbidding, sometimes a little, but you want to make sure that you have some room there, right? You don't want to end up finding the perfect property that is 10% below your market or your mortgage cap, and you find out that the actual value is already above that. So you want to make sure you have a little bit of a buffer there. Okay, then looking at the rest of the funda listing, these are the things that we actually look at whenever we look at a property, price per square meter, because that's going to tell you a little bit more about what the actual value is and the actual property total value, right? And this is where you can also start comparing it to other properties. So we look at the price per square meter. We also look at what the actual service costs are. If it's a VVE, so let's say you're buying an apartment and it's part of a bigger block, then it's part of an owner association. There will be service costs linked to owning the property that you'll have to pay towards the owner association. If this fee is relatively low, and when is it low? So we always use a calculation that the service fee should be anywhere between 1.2 to 1.5, 1.6 euros per square meter. So let's say this property is 50 square meters and you're paying 66 euros per month. That is a little bit more than 1.2 per square meter. Let's say this amount would have been 50 euros, then it would be 1 euro per square meter and would be on a relatively low side. If it's 150 euros, then it's a relatively high side. That tells you a little bit about how healthy owner association is and whether you actually need to ask follow-up questions. If it's very high, figure out why. If it's very low, you might get in trouble with banks because they don't like a non-well managed owner association. Then looking at a few other things, the energy label is very important, of course. They'll tell you a little bit about the sustainability of the property. The higher the energy label, the better the value of the properties as well. We're seeing a push from the government towards higher energy labels. So a lot of building corporations are forced to actually improve their labels. And I think that what you'll see is that moving forward, a lot of people will look for higher energy labels as well. And then whether it's full ownership, the ground. So there's two different setups. One is a freehold, which means that the ground is fully owned by you. The other one is a leasehold, and this means that the ground is owned by the municipality or by a private party. In case of the latter, steer clear from it because the banks do not like private leaseholds. If it's a municipal leasehold, then you might have to pay on an annual basis. Have a look into that. So double check that to make sure you understand what the ground situation is. And then last but not least, if it's a VVE, then find out if there's a maintenance fund, if there's a maintenance plan, and also if there's a reserve fund. So double check that because that will help you understand how well maintained the property and building is by the owner association. So triple check that as well. So those are the fundamentals. And now we go over to the third part, which is value. So let's look back at that property again that we just saw. It's the Sluisstraat. It's on for 400,000 euros. There, bum. Okay, what we hear a lot, and let me get a sip because I always kind of like wind myself up when I talk about this part. What we hear a lot is how much over the asking price should I bid? Um, and this is also what a lot of newspapers are talking about. Okay, hey, whenever you read it, that Peter has offered 60,000 euros over the asking price, and John bought another property, he bought 100,000 euros over the asking price. Wow! That is crazy. Look at how crazy the market is. Okay, wrong. Red lights. This is not the way you should be looking at properties. What you should be looking at, these shouldn't be showing yet, but what you should be looking at is something else. First of all, let's look at the asking price, right? It was 400,000 euros. But if we look at the market value, it's 430,000 euros. And the purchase price 460,000 euros, then yeah, you can say that the difference between the asking price and purchase price is 60,000 euros, which is about 15%. The actual difference between the market value and the purchase price is lower though, it's 7.5%. So what we should be talking about is this amount and not this amount. Why? Because this is agent number one. He puts it up for 400,000 euros. The asking price is the price that the agent defines, the selling agent, and puts it up on the market for. Let's say he's very opportunistic And he thinks, okay, let's put up close to the market value because a lot of people are overbidding by a certain percentage. At least that's what they believe they should do. So we can get a good deal out of this. But the other agent says, okay, hey, I want to impress the sellers more. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something else. I'm actually going to put it up for 380 instead of 400,000 euros. And then suddenly, this difference is even bigger between the asking price and the purchase price because technically the market value doesn't change. But if an agent decides to put the property up for much less than the market value, then you'll see a big jump here. So if everybody starts talking about the actual difference between the asking price and the purchase price, then people start thinking that they have to offer 20% over the asking price. Okay, let's apply the same reason to a agent who actually puts the property up for the market value, 430,000 euros. Okay, and then if everybody starts overbidding by 20%, then he's quite a lot richer and the seller's quite a lot richer. But what we're seeing is that the market value of properties will be bumped up, bumped up, bumped up because we look at properties sold in the past. And if everybody decides to overbid by 20, 30% because that's what they heard, then what we're going to do is we're going to make the market unlivable for starters and more expensive. And then, yes, a bubble can actually be created. But what we try to do is we try to fight and battle that narrative a little bit by saying, okay, hey, don't look at the asking price because that is at the discretion of the sellers and it's very subjective. Look at the market value. How do you define the market value? You look at properties sold in the last 6 to 12 months, and you look at similar properties. We'll actually share an email, I think, a couple of days after this session, where we go into a little bit more depth about this. Okay, and then what's a winning offer? Okay, a winning offer is a offer that is the most appealing, but also the most considerate. So there's a couple of things, right? The first of all is if the price good enough. So if a seller doesn't get the price he wants or gets too low of a price, then it's not interesting for him. But please don't fall in the trap that the highest price is always the best price. Why? Let me give you an example. If a price is too high and the selling agent thinks that you're not able to actually get that mortgage and be able to follow through, then they're not going to go for it. If the selling prices or the purchase price that you want to offer is a little bit more accurate, you have decent conditions, then they'll most likely go for that over the higher price. The second thing is offer security because the seller will want to know that you can move forward with a deal, right? And this is where we can also come in because we actually can actually do the due diligence and we can add several clauses into the offer that will support. Let me give you an example about a clause. Let's go back to that mortgage clause. A mortgage clause means that if you submit an offer and you sign a purchase contract and you don't get a mortgage, then you can actually pull out of the deal. But that means that the timeline for the seller before he knows when it's guaranteed that you move forward can be anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. Um, if you say, okay, I need 100% mortgage on the actual purchase price, and you've overbid by too much, the selling agent is not going to take you seriously. But if you can show that you have some capital to put up yourself, and you only need 90% of the purchase price as a mortgage, then most likely you'll be able to move forward. Also, share a little bit about any third parties that you're working with, whether it's a mortgage advisor, whether it's with us. It's very, very important to share that. Maybe share a little bit more about your background because the personal touch does definitely matter, especially if you're buying from a private owner. There's an emotional element to the property, right? And the security that you're a solid person who has a job and can actually get a mortgage is very important. And then, of course, the least amount of hassle. Let's say the seller has bought a new property and he can move in December. Well, maybe that's a bit far away. Let's make it October, right? But you really, really, really want to move in June. Then the seller would have to leave the property, would have to find something temporary, and then you can only move in October. That's not ideal. That's a lot of hassle for the seller. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that the offer that you submit is considered also to what the seller is looking for. So find out more during the viewing about what the seller is looking for. When are they moving out? Why did they sell? Stuff like that. And the personal touch, add a little description about yourself. Maybe add a little photo. Make sure that the seller understands that you love the property. You actually are a real person and you're not a investor who just wants to buy it and rent it out. So those are some things you can actually add into the offer to make it more attractive and considerate. The last tip that we'll give you is due diligence. So due diligence is doing the pre-work, right? It's understanding what the property is like and also make sure you understand what the value is. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a quick question. because we have a surveyor and we have an appraiser here. I would love to know from you guys if the surveyor, if she or he comes before or after the offer, and technically the same thing for the appraiser. Let's see if I can actually see it in the chat. Maybe you guys can pop it in the chat. So, do you think the surveyor comes before or after the offer is accepted? And what do you think about the appraiser? Does it come before or after the offer is accepted as well? Pop it in the chat, and I'm very curious to see your answers. Okay, let me share with you. So both of these parties come after the offer is accepted. So what you need to know is that before your offer is accepted, technically you don't know if you've gotten the deal. And if you spend money on that, if you spend money on a survey and an appraisal, you don't get the deal accepted, then you lose that money, right? And this is it's going to cost you about $1,000 in total. These two parties. So make sure you do it after the offer is accepted. Why is it important to do it after the offer is accepted? Because you want to figure out what the market value is of the property before you actually complete the application for your mortgage, before you sign a purchase contract. Why is that important? Because let's say you sign the purchase contract, the cool off period ends, so you're technically committed, and only then do you find out that you'll not be able to get the mortgage from the mortgage provider because the market value is too low, then you're a little bit screwed, right? So this is something that I would advise you do before the purchase contract is signed, but after your offer is accepted. The same thing applies for the surveyor. Very important. You want to find out what type of property you've built and what the condition is of that property. So you want to make sure that you don't end up buying I think it's a Dutch saying, a cat in the bag, end up buying something that is not what you thought it was, and it needs a lot of repairs and it needs a lot of renovation. So make sure you do your due diligence after your offer is accepted, and also think about how you actually address this in the offer. So you can request a technical inspector for after the offer is accepted. But when you, for example, submit an offer where you say, I don't need a mortgage technically, I do want a mortgage, but I don't need it exactly, and you still want to have an appraiser come in, then you need to figure out how you actually are going to share this with the selling agent. But make sure you get them in after the offer is accepted, before your purchase contract is signed. Okay, that sums up the presentation from today. There's a little bit of a recap, and we'll also share this presentation with you. Before you get started, get in the right state of mind. Very, very important. So nail your finances, use the fundamentals. Also look at market value and send a smart offer, and don't forget to do your due diligence. Take the time for that as well. That is it. The Q&A section. I always need to figure out how I actually can see the Q&A without. Let me see if I can see the Q&A. Yes, I can see the Q&A. What is mortgage principal? That's a question from Maria. That's a good question, Maria. So what you have when you pay a mortgage, you pay interest, which is technically the money the bank charges you for taking out the mortgage, and then you pay off your mortgage. That's the principal. So at some point over a period of 30 years, you need to pay off the mortgage completely. And the principal is the actual amount that you'll pay off on a monthly basis, which lowers your mortgage amount. The interest is just the money that the bank charges you to actually earn on top of your mortgage. I hope that answered your question a little bit. Then, anonymous attendee, what are the other ownership costs in addition to the mortgage interest that we should include when comparing against rent? Costs that we wouldn't have when we are online or only renting. That's a good question. So, like I mentioned, take about 3 to 5% of the purchase price as your purchase fees. What is that? That is transfer tax. There's a notary fees. That is the interpreter, the appraiser, the surveyor. Did I miss anything? Us. Don't forget about us. Is there anything else? No, I think that covers the majority of it. Sometimes you need to pay for a bank guarantee, but those 7 things are important to take care of. If you don't pay transfer tax, then take into account about 3% of the purchase price. If you do pay transfer tax, then take into account about 5%. But of course, some of these fees are set fees. So the higher your purchase price, the lower some of these set fees will be percentually, of course. I hope that answered your question a little bit. And then, Maria, how much on the cost of financial advisors tax deductible? So the full amount is tax deductible. What that means is that if you pay 30 or 40% tax annually, and the majority of you will be most likely pay 40%, then you get 40% of that whole amount back. So if you have a mortgage advisor and they charge you 2,500 euros or 3,000 euros, then you get 40% of that amount back. Another question from Ria: what's the difference between a surveyor and an appraiser? So a surveyor inspects the property, and an appraiser, or is that a technical inspector inspects the property, and an appraiser gets the valuation. Maybe I've mixed up those definitions there. I think maybe a surveyor in English is actually an appraiser as well. But what I was talking about is somebody that does a technical inspection and somebody that actually does get the value from the property. I hope that answers your question. If there's any more questions, please pop them in here. If not, I'll give 1 more minute. Let me quickly take a sip. I think those were all the questions. Thanks a lot for attending Lunch and Learn. I hope it was useful. My name is Kimo, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon. It's going to be very sunny this weekend. Have a lovely weekend as well. And if there's, I see a question, another question pop in the Q&A. Is it a question? So a survey does a technical inspection and appraiser sets up the value of the house. Yeah, that's correct. Let's use the phrase, or let's use definition technical inspector. They'll do the actual inspection, and the appraiser, he does the value of the property. So there's two different professions there. One goes into the property and checks what condition the property is in. The other one looks at reference properties. He also goes to the property and checks what condition it's in, but he'll use it for a different thing because he'll actually define the value of the property. Can you tell us something about new builds, Jelena? That's very broad. Yes, I can. New builds are interesting because you buy something that's high quality, most likely. You can still influence it to some extent. And you know that it's not going to lose any direct value in a short period of time. The downsides to a new build, however, are that you will buy something that is not finished yet. So you'll have to rent another property while it gets finished. That means you have two costs. You have rental costs and you'll have mortgage costs because you'll pay for installments. For every phase that the new build is finished, you'll pay something. So take into account that, and also make sure that you really, really understand to what level the property will be finished, because the devil's in the details, and sometimes they'll deliver a property but without power sockets. So you want to make sure that you understand what you'll be getting. I hope that answers your question a little bit. Also, maybe one good thing to know about new builds is when you buy a new build, especially in the capital or in some other cities, there's most likely ground lease because the ground is owned by the municipality. So double check that, what those payments are. Any further questions? No, I don't think so. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a lovely afternoon again and a lovely weekend. And hope to see you. Hope to be able to help you. And if you have any questions, feel free to book a free intake. You know where to find us. Take care. Bye bye.